Hello, and welcome to my set review of the new upcoming set to Revolution Custom Standard, Exalts of Twiltrie. Twiltrie? Twiltrie? Something like that. So, it has been, well, now about 3.5 months since the introduction of Errors in the Weft and Kitsuo Dusk of Time, which means we are coming up on our next rotation. Uh, so in this rotation, we are losing the very important set Saros Age of Tracks, designed by maybe the greatest of all custom designers, Zangi, and replacing it, it's going to be big shoes to fill, is this set Exalts of Twiltrie, designed also by Zangi. Um, I'm going to be going through not all the cards, I'm going to be pretty selective in this set, talking about their impact on Revolution. I'm trying to be pretty specific about what decks I think cards could be good in. Not just this card is good, but this card could be played in this context. If it seems like I'm not mentioning a card that I should, or I'm not acknowledging an interaction, or I'm getting something wrong, I'm actually not. That's all deliberate misdirection to give me a competitive advantage in the next season. If you want to see the cards I'm mentioning, because I might mention some cards that aren't on the slides, you can go to Escape from Limbo, linked in the description. So yes. But first, I'm going to talk about the big decks that we are losing. Survey Tracks was a quite impactful set, and I want to specifically talk about the decks that are, as of right now, pretty dead. First of all, Heroic. There is still some Heroic stuff in Old Doom, and we certainly have excellent combat tricks still, chief among them Face of Animosity and Momentous Charge. But we're losing Ephemia. Ephemia was the number one reason to be heroic. If you could target Ephemia twice in one turn, you got a huge advantage. Without Ephemia, I think you might still play Face of Animosity, but I don't think any particular reason to play the density you would need for Ephemia. I also have Rotten Hunger up here. That's just a card from Exalts of Twiltrie that you could do silly things with Face of Animosity with, but probably not worth it because you wouldn't have the density now. Mono green aggro has been a staple for as long as, well, actually, I haven't been around for as long as Saros Age of Tracks has been in the format, but it's been a staple as long as I've been playing. Really subsidized by Skull and Nyxweaver and Seeker of New Horizons, and to a lesser extent, King of the Wilderness. Um, I think green base aggro is still very strong, green, but there's no particular reason to be mono green anymore. You should now probably branch into green red, green white, or green black for better interaction. Now that you don't have these very heavy devotion green cards uh, forcing you to play mono green. There was a ton of enchantment synergy in Sarah's Age Tracks, and I don't think Errors in the Weft is going to carry that on its own. Ifara really held down enchantment-based control, as did Stormscraper of Ketaphos. With those gone, I think Control will still play a bunch of enchantments because there are important enchantments that Control wants to play, but probably wouldn't play any enchantment synergy. Meanwhile, enchantment aggro cropped up a couple of times. Usually, it was Bacillo Line of Valor that was the reason to do that. Bacillo's backside gives a creature +1/+1 for each enchantment you control. Um, white, green, white, red versions of that, those are also probably dead. Base white control. Of all the colors, white's, I think, losing the most in this. I just mentioned the white enchantment synergy. White's also losing some important aggro cards and a very important control card in Fall of Alantin. This was a deck you wanted to warp your deck around. It was worth warping your deck around playing a very skewed heavy white blue mono white heavy white Bant mono base so you could cast Fall of Alantin reliably. Uh, Welkin Eviction still exists and is still very strong. That's a reason to put a lot of planes in your deck, but I don't think Welkin Eviction on its own is enough reason to be mono white, or even just like very heavy white when you could now be very heavy black, which loses a lot less. As far as Judgment's also here, that was also nearly always seen alongside Fall of Alantin before, and was the premier 3-mana counterspell in the format. Mill, Phoenix was a hell of a card. I mean, still is a hell of a card this month, uh, with GP performance. Founding of the 12, not as flashy, went through a lot of revisions, but just as important to the Mill plan. Phoenix's Judgment. Basically, there's not enough mill support to build a mill deck anymore. And lastly, not a specific deck, but just a thing that went in a bunch of different decks. Omen of Deception, Omen of Slaughter, and Honorary Third Omen Phoenix's Touch were cheap enchantments where almost all of their value was concentrated in their enter trigger. And these cards had a million uses. You would bounce them if you're Scattering Swine. You would sack them to your Host of the Never-Ending Revel. You would integrate them with your Zavok Corruptor Core. Back in the day, you would blink these. You would uh, bounce these. You would do all sorts of things. Um, these were a key part of the format. You saw them everywhere. They added to Devotion. And losing them is going to be a subtle but meaningful hit to a lot of synergies. And a bunch of other important cards. The creature lands, especially the white-blue, blue-black, and white-black ones, were really important for control. They gave you a win condition that you didn't have to spend much on, and they were very efficient. Uh, Bias has seen some incredible usage in the past couple months, and really held down kind of a black-green tempo strategy. You don't really think of black-green as tempo, but that's kind of what it was. Play cheap, evasive creatures and lots of answers. Builder of Monuments with a deck unto itself. That's gone. And of course, the whole Shrine package. I haven't seen an enormous amount of it since the Shrine reworks, but I think that deck, it was still good for that entire time. It's gone now. Okay, let's talk about Exalts of Twiltrie. It's going to take me a moment to remember. Just by going over the structure of the set and its 6 new mechanics. So, this is a 2-color faction set. It's actually the mirrored 2-color faction set to Kitsuo Dusk of Time. Kind of developed after Kitsuo Dusk of Time entered the format, specifically to complement it. So, it has the other 5 2-color pairs. It's more of a gold set than Kitsuo was. And it also has a mechanic appearing in all 5 colors, which is battles. So, starting with the battles, here we have all the battles in this set have subtype Operation. Um, almost all of them have enter triggers, and they enter with some number of defense. Your opponent defends them. You can hit them with burn spells or attack them with creatures to reduce their defense, and they get different abilities, either one-time abilities or ongoing static abilities, uh, as they lose defense. I believe like the Mythic ones have 2 levels that they can unlock, and most of the others have only 1 level. This one's Eclipse of the Divine. This one's cool. It's real flashy. My general thoughts on operations is operations that have enter effects that justify most of their cost or affect the board immediately so you can help defeat them. Those are probably pretty good. Operations that don't help you defeat them and don't affect the board are probably too slow and too much of a tempo loss. So even though Eclipse of the Divine's last level is really strong, if you play 3 mana to not affect the board, I don't know if you're ever going to get there. Our other mechanics are blue-black, Chant. Here we have the Evergnashing Dark. This is kind of like Splice onto instant or sorcery, but you splice once and then the card goes into exile and then you can cast it later from exile. All of the Chant cards are creatures, so they're somewhat awkward that they're creatures that want you to play a high density of instants and sorceries. You can chant cards cast from any zone, so you can chant your flashback cards, etc. In Blu-ray, we have Decoy. Whenever this creature attacks, you get a 1/1 copy of it, and you exile it at the beginning of the next end step. Kind of a blue-red tokens thing. Tokens is a huge theme of this set. There has never been a set where Raise the Alarm is more of a valuable card than in this set. There's tons of tokens, tons of anthems. Decoy is one of the token mechanics. Ambassador of Unseen Edge is actually not a bad blue-red aggro card. Just straight up gives your whole board +2/+0 on attacks. That's pretty strong. It's mostly on this slide instead of in the blue-red staples section because I don't think blue-red aggro makes a lot of sense. It's not really supported outside of this set. But if blue-red token aggro was a thing, you'd play this card for sure. I mean, on its own, it attacks for 4? Yeah, it attacks for 4. Red-white is Rapture. When it dies, you get it back to the battlefield with a haze counter on it, loses all abilities and can't block. It's not a token copy, though, so you can blink it, you can bounce it, kind of reset the thing, or you can just use your new vanilla creature. This is going to be a strong reason to pack exile-based removal in this set, because it's a whole bunch of very impactful def abilities that you do not want your aggro opponent to get. Green-white is Reprieve. As this permanent enters, you may return a creature you control without Reprieve to its owner's hand. It only bounces creatures, and most of these cards have a benefit if you reprieved something. This one doesn't because it's only the common. Uh, the setup it's the setup for an entire kind of green white blink slash bounce deck, which seems actually decently supported. And lastly, in black green, we have Vigor, which checks if your life total has changed this turn. Usually at the beginning of your end step, but sometimes on sorcery speed sings. Not a ton of great support for Vigor outside of this set. It's kind of against what most other sets are doing in black green, but there are some very good reasons to try to enable it anyways. Okay, I'm going to start by talking about all of the staple cards in Exalts of Twiltrie. These are the cards that I think, if you're in their colors, you probably just play them. It doesn't really matter what your synergies are. And starting off are the lands, and specifically these cycle of creature lands. So there are 5 creature lands. They only tap for one color, but they have an activated ability of the other color of their pair, and they enter tapped unless you control the basic land of that color. So the black one needs an island, the white one needs the forest, etc. And I have them lined up from left to right, kind of in order of how good I think they are. Chasm of the Silent Covenant, it's the most expensive one at 4 mana, but it becomes a real proper creature, 4/4. Experience with creature lands is usually you want the more expensive, bigger ones because the times we want these are mostly in the late game. And specifically, Vigilance is a nice ability because you can activate it, much like 100 Hand players. Activate it, attack, have it back to block. That's a ton of mana, but it's actually doable. The white green one becomes a 3/3. Makes a 1/1 whenever it attacks. That's just a great thing to get set up on an empty board, which is mostly when you try to activate this. The red white one's nearly as good. That one's a 2/2 that gives your whole board +1/+0. Red white tokens, extremely supported in this set, as I've said. So easy shoe in to play these. Black green one is a 3/3 that exiles cards from graveyards and gains life. That one's a little less like directly impactful. It's incidental graveyard hate, which is never bad to have around. And the blue red one becomes a copy of a creature you control. I'm by far the lowest on the blue red one because if you had a good creature, you probably have things to do. Better things than activate your Glimmerveil Lake. All of these, to consider whether you want them in your deck, you have to consider the cost and the benefit. The cost of these really depends on how many of the basic land they check for you have. So for Chasm of the Silent Covenant, its cost depends on how many islands you have. So I'd be much more willing to play this in my heavy blue deck splashing black than vice versa. I'd say in a typical deck where you're playing, I don't know, 8 of each and then a bunch of duels, maybe 7 or 6 of each. These are a decent cost. You probably could fit in like 2 of them before you start to feel the squeeze. But if you're like really heavy blue, then Cataclysmic Covenant is a lot cheaper. Uh, there's also the reverse cycle. These are the uncommons. They're in general, I think, a little weaker than the creature lands, but if you're splashing the other way, like if you're heavy black splashing blue, then you can't play the creature land, you have to play the Sanctum of Bleeding Bark. Um, so, once again, they go the other way, so the white one takes for a mountain, the blue one takes for a swamp, etc. Um, None of the abilities are like hugely inspiring confidence for me, but if you're like a 11 mountain deck splashing white, so Hall of Reckoning is pretty free, so you might as well play it. I think it's the best one. 2/1/1s at instant speed is at least a thing. The blue black one draws cards, red blue one also draws cards, but it's more expensive. Uh, blue, blue red one draws 2 cards, but the blue black one digs deeper. Black green one is a regrowth, which is kind of all 3 of those in the middle are kind of like slow card advantage. That's doable. The green white one puts +1/+1 counters on a creature you control. I think that's probably the worst one. But yeah, the main consideration for these is not like, do I have synergy with their abilities, but is my mana base very heavy on one type of basic? Um, I mean, in theory, if you were like mono red, you could, bad example, if you were like mono black, you could run Gallowsprout Timber. Uh, like, it'll always enter untap, it'll tap for green, but maybe you can eat the basically colorless land, and then you'll always have the black mana to activate it. That's fully possible. It's really your density of those basics that determines whether or not how much of your tap land equities you're eating. Oh, and there's 2 more lands. There's Crumbling Ruin. This is kind of a similar card to Time Worn Crags. It can turn a non-basic land and itself into everywheres, giving them tap, add 1 mana of any color. You could use it as a fixing land in a pinch, but you really don't want to. This is competing with Time-Worn Crags. Both of them are quite important right now because of the creature lands from Eras in the Weft, which can get quite large, and having an answer to that is very useful. I think against monocolor decks, which are often the decks playing those lands, Crumbling Ruin is better because Time-Worn Crags will often be quite expensive there. And Crumbling Ruin is really not good at mono screwing people, so I think Crumbling Ruin is probably better nowadays. There's also Gilded Cord. This is a land we've seen before in, I think, Blood Lake Rivers. It's a fine fixing land. I think probably not worth playing in your 2-color decks because you have so many good 2-color lands now. It does gain basic land types, which matters for the Kitso Dusk of Time cycle and for the cycles we just talked about. But still, 2-color basically tapped land early in the game. If you have really tough mono requirements, you could play it. And in 3 colors, you always play this. Untapped if you need colorless, and then otherwise tapped. Something like an Ash Barrens, kind of. Also, by the way, a non-mana activated ability, if you care about that. This is a very easy to activate non-mana activated ability you can get every turn. Okay, let's move on to white, and starting with the headliner for the set, its immediate Renegade promo, Casus Belli. That's the Latin term meaning case for war, meaning like the legal justification for a war. Kind of an outdated legalistic concept. Anyways, this is the Banishing Light. It's legendary, thank God. It exiles only creatures or planeswalkers, and it gives your whole board +1/+0. They just staple the Goblin War Drums to this nearly playable card. This card's really good. It's legendary, so maybe you don't play the full 4, but I'd play 3. In basically any white deck that has creatures in it, I would play this. I don't know. It answers creatures, and it's an Ansem. Anthems are really good in this set. We already have white decks are already playing tons of Banishing Lights, and have reasonable synergy for Banishing Lights, stuff like Hang that cares about your 3-mana permanents. I don't have much to say about Casus Belli, except it's a big shot in the arm for white, which needed it. Other card on this slide is Hender Ravelin. 2 mana, 3/2 Vigilance. When you cast your second spell each turn, becomes a 4/4 Angel Creature Flying. Second spell is a theme in this set. And I haven't really rated second spells like a build-around thing. I think they just put cards in your deck. We are losing Prince of the Pride, which was the premier white, kind of generic aggro 2-drop. And I'm going to be honest, the white aggro 2-drop pickings are pretty slim. I might not even talk about Hender Ravelin if it was in any other color, because other colors have better 2-drops. But in white, your best 2-drop after Prince of the Pride is gone is like Genotype Splicer, which I love, but it's not much of a card you want to play on turn 2. There's Weave Dispatcher, also a card you don't really want to play on turn 2. There's Lost Resistor, but that requires artifact synergy. What I'm saying is Hender Ravelin is the best you got, and there are good 1 and 3 drops for white aggro and good 5 drops. So maybe you accept that this is the 2-drop you have to play. 2 important battles here. First, we have a board white battle, Clash at Orith Cross. This destroys only creatures. It's 5 mana, but it is a battle. And if you can just deal 2 damage to it, so you're a control deck, you probably do that with a Shock, or something like that, maybe with a creature land or something, then you just get a 1/1 every turn. That's like a thing worth 2 to 3 mana that you just get. I think this card is very strong. White-red, as I said, probably the best home for it, just because you can point the Shock at this, and that's really easy. The defeated thing gives your creature tokens +1/+1 in Vigilance. That takes only 1 more Shock. Oh, by the way, I'm mentioning Shock because there's not a lot of burn spells right now that can hit battles, but there is ongoing discussion in which certain cards will possibly be changed so they can hit battles. So it's possible that, just throwing up possibilities, Mask Smith and electronic countermeasures could hit battles in the future. No guarantees. So there might be more ways of interacting with them that don't exist right now, because currently they're not really interactable. Your main competition for the board wipe slot is Chromatic Rift, which is good, but really, to justify Chromatic Rift over Clash, you need to be playing creatures yourself, which not really what you do with board wipes, and Exit, which actually, Exit gains a little bit of benefit in this set. The awkward thing about Exit has always been, what permanents are you playing, because it blows up almost everything. It only misses artifacts, you kind of wanted value-generating artifacts. But now it doesn't hit battles, so you can actually have value generating battles, and then exit can blow up all the non-battles. The other white battle I want to talk about is Advance of the Quiet Moon. This is a Banishing Light, exiles any non-land permanent, and it has a defeated condition that I don't think you'll get to very often. The main reason I'm talking about this is because this is not an enchantment; it's a battle. As I said, it doesn't die to pest infestation. It doesn't die to Sunder's Avalanche. It can't be hit by Hungry Blob. Uh, the fact that like this is even with the changes that might happen, this will be very hard to interact with. Makes it a very interesting catch-all answer. Also, once again, 3 mana permanent. You can hit it off Revolt at the Palace. Uh, I think this can probably replace Sealing Strike depending on how good the battle removal ends up being. If you can swing the double white. Its main competition is really Casus Belli, the card from the same set. Okay, that card's so strong and kind of occupies the same slot. But it doesn't. But this answers artifacts and enchantments and battles, so you might need this one anyways. On to blue. 2 cards with flash here. 2 bounce spells, in fact. Frog of Eternal Gloom. 1 blue, 3/1 flash. When it enters, you bounce a creature you don't control. This is just a very good, efficient mana war. Flash, 3 power, all exciting stuff. There have been whispers of like a blue-black Esper-ish tempo deck going around. PTM brought that a couple months ago to the GP. And this is kind of in that space. It's not a broken card, but it's very strong. It's worth considering. Advance of Rune and Whisper is our new unsummon. We actually didn't have a just straight up unsummon, 1 mana bounce a creature at instant speed. It's a battle. Once again, normal synergies around it being a permanent apply. It has a defeated condition that once again could come up, but you're not like going out of your way for it. I'd play with no creatures, no real way to defeat it. Its main competition right now is Dragon's Repose. Most of the decks that want an unsummon are playing tons of flyers anyway, so you might want this instead, so you can bounce planeswalkers and stuff. But I think Advance is like your default choice. Also mentioning, these are both permanents with flash. Rabura Goliath is still good. Rabura Goliath dearly misses the Omens, those were its best support cards. But even without the Omens, these are acceptable replacements. Blue-Black Flash probably still lives. Probably should have had a slide for it. I don't actually have one. Not counter spells, card draw. 3 important card draw spells in this set. First is Discern. This is our only 1 mana instant speed cantrip. Just draws a card, no selection, but it has flashback for 2 and a blue. So it's like Sync twice, except the first cast is just 1 cheaper. I mentioned Chant is a mechanic that allows you to splice onto your instant sorceries. It really wants cheap instants that you can play at any time, so you have something to chant onto that's as cheap as possible. Discern is that. The main competition for the 1 mana cantrip slot in blue right now is Parse, which I haven't seen as much of as I expected to. Parse is more selection, but Discern has graveyard synergies, it's instant speed, it gets you 2 casts for your Savvy Smith type stuff. I think Discern is the default option now. I think it goes in your Spellslinger decks and your control decks equally. Good at both. Could even edge out stuff like Seafloor Treasures. Although Seafloor Treasures, I think, still justifies itself if you can fill your graveyard fast enough. Now we have 2 draw 3s. Path of Scales. It's a 4 mana draw 3 at sorcery speed. We've had a couple of those in the format. They're, I think, usually a little too slow. The advantage you get here is that if you can deal 2 damage to it, once again, Shock, very useful for that. Blue-red, Jeskai, Control can do that. Then you get Cumberstone. Creatures you don't control get -1/-0. Once again, it's a battle. It's nearly impossible to kill, especially a 4 mana battle. So if Hungry Blob gets changed, it still can't hit this. And it makes your opponent's creature smaller, so if Sunder's Avalanche gets changed, that has trouble hitting this. This card, 4 mana sorcery speed's a real tough pill to swallow in your control deck, but that Cumberstone is an effect that's like way more annoying than it seems, even in Constructed, especially with like 15 Raise the Alarms entering the format. Oh, and the fully defeated version's also like really strong. Yeah. This kind of occupies a similar slot to Research Grant. I don't think you can afford this and Research Grant as like card draw enchantments that take a bit to get set up and then get you lots of value. I think if you're willing to stretch up the mana, definitely worth considering in your blue control decks. The other draw 3 is 3 become 1, 5 mana instant, draw 3, but then cast a spell mana value 3 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. This is just really efficient. I mean, I didn't really want to cast my draw threes early in the game, anyways. So by the time, if you can get there, it's effectively a 2 mana draw three, which is crazy. Um, Along you have 3 mana spells to cast, but luckily there's a really good 3 mana counter spell in this set. You can always play 3 mana removal spells. Once again, this gives things instant speed. You can flash out Harvesting Blade on your opponent's draw step. Um, I'm sure you'll find good 3 mana things to cast. That's not hard. Play a Boro with it. That sounds fun. It has a condition where it costs 3 less to cast. You have an artifact, creature of flying, creature of 3 power, and a warlock. The artifact is what? Harvesting Blade or Jetstream Cruiser in blue control. Jetstream Cruiser also does creature of flying. There's a bunch of creature of flying you could play. I think that says exactly 3 power. That's the tough one. I don't know what creature of exactly 3 power your control deck is playing. I guess it's not strictly a control card, but it costs 5 and it draws cards. So, Warlock is easy, by the way. Exorcist of Ares is the Warlock. Oh, and counter spells. Boy, there were a lot of good counter spells in Seraphage of Tracks, and there's a lot of excellent counter spells in this set too. There's Overrule Saw. This is a quench, but it costs 1 less if you have fewer lands than opponent. And the reason that's relevant is if you're on the draw, your opponent goes land, maybe go, you go land, go, island, go, and they go land, play their 2-drop, and you counter their 2-drop. On the draw, you get to counter their 2-drop with that's enormous. It's more upside than any other quench in the format, probably any other quench we've ever had. And I would say put this in every blue deck because that tempo advantage is just so massive. If I wasn't pretty confident this was going to get nerfed, the curators have already said this one's probably not long for this world. Um, Other counterspells: Skytide Severer, 2 on a 2-1 flying, reasonable stat line, and Blue Sacket to counter a non-creature spell. This controller plays 3. Classic tempo card here, and the chant here is actually one of the chants I'm higher on. If you have enough instants in your deck that aren't counterspells, you could like discern plus pay the chant to get Mono Leak plus draw a card. That's pretty good. This is actually a chant card that makes you really want to put the instant sorcery in my deck. And even if I had no other instant sorceries, I'd still consider this. It's a pretty good ability. Protects my wide board from like wraths. Oh, and at 3 mana, we have Unravel Thoughts. Uh, so just baseline, you can counter a spell, or draw a card, or tap all your opponent's creatures, or bounce a non-land permanent. All extremely relevant options on this. And if your opponent has more cards in hand than you, because you were chanting, or because you're a more aggressive deck, or just because you're on the play, and the player on the play usually has fewer cards in hand, um, then you get 2 of these. You get better Cryptic Command, pretty much. Wait, oh, these are the actual Cryptic Command options. I just realized that. Oh god, we have Cryptic Command in Rev now. I think this card, it might be stronger than actual Cryptic Command. It's that good. You should put this in every blue deck. Black. We got 2 hand attack spells in black. There's Advance the Emperor Bargain and Extract the Truth. They're both 2 mana. They both hit any non-land card. They both have upside. Advance is a battle that for 4 defense becomes the rack. Extract the Truth is a cannon reprint. It can also kill enchantments. Your other options for 2 mana hand attack are kind of Dissect Intel. If you're an Integrate, you probably play Dissect Intel. If you're blue-black, you probably want Search and Seizure over either of these. The ability to not be dead in the late game is hugely important. But the real question for all of the 2 mana hand attack spells not named Exorcist of Errors is it worth playing them over the 1 mana hand attack spells? Duress and Absentia probably overshadow all of these. But if you really need to hit something that Duress or Absentia doesn't hit, something like, I know, Revolutionary's Monument, then maybe you play these. There's also some staple answer cards. So Clash of the Shaded Maw is a 2 mana graveyard hate card. And it's a really mean graveyard hate card. Exiles any cards that they put into your opponent's graveyard from anywhere. You need to deal 3 damage to it, not 2 to get the first ability, which makes your opponent mill 2 cards. But when it's defeated, you actually start to play all of the cards that it got put into graveyard. Basically, this is the sideboard card. If you're in black, you play this instead of Faces of the Faceless. Not much else to it. Heart's Betrayal is a 2 mana removal spell. It's fully unconditional, but you lose life equal to the mana value or power of the creature or planeswalker you kill. That could be a lot of life. That could be a lot of life. That's probably like at least 3 life for most creatures you care about, and it could easily be 4 or 5. If you were willing to eat the life loss, you could play this. Basically, I would need to be really, really aggressive and low curving before I play Heart's Betrayal over Hang. basically, if I have very few 3-drops of Corrupt Hang, and I'm so aggressive that I don't care about the life loss, then I'll play Heart's Betrayal. Otherwise, I think it's probably like third in line to the um, 2-mana black removal spell Throne. And we have Night's Whisper. Actual, factual Night's Whisper. 2-mana sorcery, draw 2 cards, lose 2 life. We do have, like, strictly better Night's Whisper already in Passive Resolve. That costs double black. Density of this effect, good in control. Like, I would even justify this in, like, blue-black control. Definitely a huge impact on black-white control, where Passive Unresolved was a little steep. And we also have some typal stuff in black. Give me a moment. There are minor typal themes in the set for 10 different types. Most of those types have some cards that already exist, but I don't think the like full-on typal decks look strongly supported. They only usually have one really good support card, which means probably not enough to warp your whole deck around. But these two cards I think are nearly good enough on their own. So Matriarch of Veiled Kin is a 4-mana 2/2, gives your other warlocks +1/+1, and whenever they hit your opponent, that player discards a card. And when it enters, you get to flip cards until you find a warlock that costs 2 or less. This card's slightly awkward in that it wants you to play a lot of warlocks for the first ability, but it wants you to play only one 2-mana or less warlock card in your deck, so you always hit the one you want to hit. With the second ability, that card is almost always Exorcist of Errors. That's a 2-mana warlock. That's like the biggest staple creature in the whole format. Data Weaver is also a warlock, by the way, and of course there's tons of warlocks in this set. So this could be like an integrate side thing where you're integrate and also warlocks, and you're playing Exorcist and Data Weaver and Matriarch, and that's enough warlocks. Not legendary, pumps other copies of itself. Guardian of Ashen Oaths is for zombies and spirits. There's a lot of spirits. Kitso Just with Time has a lot of spirits, although they're all red-green. The two spirits that seem most likely to do something with this are Pressuring Ghoul and Fragile Soul from GQ Chaos Reigns. Both like reasonably aggressive spirits. Fragile Soul is a card I had high hopes for, but people are playing the black removal, not the red removal, so it's not as good as I thought it would be. Anyway, Guardian of Ashen Oaths is 3-mana 3/2 lifelink, and it taps to make a 2/2. You have to pay 5 life, and 2 can't block, but that token also has lifelink. That activate ability is strong enough if you can swing the life that I think it's at least worth talking about. So, not hugely high on this one. And 5-drops. You know, we had a lack of just like giant value bomb black 5-drops before this. Keon Heap Exec was kind of the primary one. That card is not like spectacular. So here's 2 more options. Fiend of the Crimson Pact has a chant ability, so you can do something of it early in the game. That's a tutor. I'm not super high in the tutor ability here, like the chant ability, just because it doesn't super fit into any combo decks, which are mainly the decks where I want to play 3 mana and 3 life for a tutor. But the 5-mana version is a 6/6 flyer that tutors whenever it hits your opponent. Only if you hit a player or a planeswalker, weirdly. Not if you hit a battle in the battle set. Yeah. If you, like, often black decks had a problem where they would rip out their opponent's entire hand and deny them all their resources, but then both players would kind of be top decking, and if your opponent top decked better than you, they could actually get out of it. So having a win the game stupid value bomb 5-drop is actually kind of useful in that style of deck. Steep the Pact one with another 5-drop. Formatting is kind of wacky. You get 3 2/2 warlocks, and each warlock has an upkeep trigger, and it's one of these 4 abilities. So gives your opponent's creatures -1/-1. They discard a card, they lose 2 life, or you gain 2 life. By the time you cast your 5-drop, none of these abilities like enormously relevant, but it's 5 mana for 3 2/2s with relevant types and stats. Yeah, harder to answer except with sweepers. Although there are a lot of 2 damage sweepers in the format right now, which might count against this. Moving on to red. We got some good aggro cards here. Fang of the Pale Thorn is a 1-mana 2/1. It can't block. When it attacks, you exile the top card of your library, and when it dies, you can play the last card exiled by it until the end of your next turn. So, the red aggro 1-drop slot is actually pretty open right now. Your main contender is Calamity Cat, but you want Calamity Cat with specific things with like attack triggers, so you can get extra value out of its discard or combat damage triggers. Now, Fang the Pale Thorn, I have it on the authority of no less than PTM himself. This card is not spectacular in aggro. It's playable because it's a 1-mana 2/1. But the fact that you don't get the card at the time when you want means it doesn't help you like curve out um, and be aggressive in the early turns when it really matters. That said, this card's probably very good in your like still aggressive but not super fast red decks, like your blue red looter type things, maybe even blue red green looter. I think it certainly takes the title of default best red 1-drop. There's also a 4-drop in the set, Burning Blood Orator, 4 mana 4/2 haste. When it attacks, you can make another creature a 4/2 with Rapture. So if that creature isn't a token, when it dies, it'll come back uh, with no abilities and can't block. This creature also has Rapture itself. 4 mana 4 power haste, and takes 2 removal spells to deal with. That's pretty good. Your main competition for the 4-drop, Agrosot is Ardor, Forefront of Freedom. I think Ardor is probably better. Ardor can often represent more immediate damage than Burning with Order. Much like Burning with Order, a single removal doesn't deal with it cleanly. But both of these, I think, play similar roles in that they're good with tokens. Burning with Order also good with small non-tokens. Your judgment which one you want for your red aggro deck. There's also some answers in this set. Magma Spray, 1 mana, instant cannon reprint, deals 2 damage only to creatures. If it would die this turn, exile instead. Very good against all these Rapture cards running around, stuff like Catabalist. Competing with Shock. Shock hits face, Shock hits battles, Shock hits planeswalkers. I think Shock is probably the default, unless there's specific things you need to hit with Magma Spray. Verdant Radiance is replacing a God Divided as our 3 mana red artifact sweeper. It can either blow up all artifacts mana values 3 or less. I think the black-white artifact aggro deck is still very real. This is the sideboard card you bring in against that, and it probably wins you the game when you cast it. It has a second option to discard any number of cards and draw that many cards plus 1. I have word that ability might be getting changed to something else, possibly like untap a creature you control and then get an extra combat phase after this phase. Either way, this is purely a sideboard card. You bring it in when you need to kill Silver Parabellum. Advance of Fire and Faith is a hugely important card. This is our new best Pyroclasm. It's 3 mana, unlike actual Pyroclasm, but it only hits creatures you don't control. That means you can play this card in your token aggro deck against opposing token aggro decks, and you should, because token aggro decks are going to be very real. Its main competition is Calamitous Warcry. Basically, you play Calamitous Warcry if you have no creatures, or at least no creatures that this hits, and you would prefer an instant. But if you have any creatures that your Pyroclasm can hit at all, you want Advance of Fire and Faith. It also has a defeated condition that might come up sometimes. Moving on to green, we have an extremely important card in Husk Forger Acolyte. Green mana, 1/1, taps for a colorless, or for 6 mana, it becomes a 5/5 with trample and loses all other types and abilities. So, this is our first 1 mana Monodwarf in Rev. Pretty straightforwardly, you put this in every green deck that's not like hyper aggressive. It increases the value of every 3-drop in the format. It even has a 6 mana ability that is quite good. That ability is going to come up, and it's going to be good when it comes up. Tap for colorless means it doesn't like help pay your double green cost, but honestly, you don't really care. Yeah, this card, it is like, I think the most sought after promo in the whole set. If you promo this card, you know that no card is going to be occupying the same slot as it for the next 2 years, and it's going to be played in a ton of different decks. Your promo is going to get played by so many different people. The name's a little tough for a promo. I almost have like a Hollow Knight idea for the promo, because like Husk is a Hollow Knight thing. Huskforge is kind of a specific thing. Hard to find like a cyberpunk implementation of that, but I think there's a lot of good promo art stuff I'm still thinking on for this when I promo it. Um, uh, Actually, awkwardly for Huskforge Act, like we didn't have great greens 3-drops going into this set. I mean, Skull and Nyxweaver were just rotated, and the other greens 3-drops were just like not inspiring confidence. There's like Brutal Throat Crusher, Menagerie Mechanic. None of those really inspiring. There was Xeno if you have counter synergy, that's pretty good. Alrontan Visionary if you're ramping further, that's still good. Hardy Rough Rider, I guess. But luckily, this set brings 2 new greens 3-drops, which are much better. Faithline Marshal is a 3 mana 2/2 with Flash, and it gives you bonuses when you cast your first, second, and third spell each turn. Your first spell gets you a 1/1, your second spell gets you a tapped everywhere token, and your third spell gives you a whole board +1/+1 until end of turn. As I said, the first, second spell thing is just you put spells in your deck and you can do it. Flash on a green card's a little awkward because there's not really a green Flash deck, so your opponent's not going to really Opponent's going to see this coming a mile away, but still flash it in on their end step and then just start generating value. This easily generates at least one soldier each turn, probably more than that. Speaking of 3 drops that generate tokens every turn, Redeem of Hollow Flesh is a 3 mana 3/3 with Ward 2. Ward 2 on a 3 drop is huge, makes it basically unkillable for like 2 turns. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, your opponent has to exile a card from their graveyard, and you get either a 1/1 soldier or a treasure token or a +1/+1 counter on this. So this is just, both of these just generic value bomb 3 drops for your generic green deck. Only a couple other green cards. Purifier of Dawnbloom Green with another Naturalize card. Oops, I kind of cut off some of the text here. 2 on a 2/2, got Reprieve. Destroy the artifact enchantment, mana value 1 or less. If you reprieve, instead, any artifact or enchantment. The slot for green creature that blows up artifacts and enchantments is pretty contested with Hungry Ball and Masksmith right now. This doesn't even kill battles. But if you're in the Reprieve deck, this could be the rare build around sideboard card. If you're in Reprieve and your opponent playing artifacts and enchantments, then you play this. Clash at Dawnbloom Grove is a 3 mana card that destroys non-creature, non-land permanents. And it has a reasonable thing if you can deal 2 damage to it and then 2 more damage to it. Especially the first build is pretty good. I think you probably have better ways to deal with non-creature, non-land permanents, but it is an option in that slot. Oh, and 2 more green cards. Bring Promise Bounds is a 2 mana ramp spell with an artifact. Honestly, even though this is one of the only 2 mana rocks Rev's ever had, I don't have huge hopes for this, mainly because Root Fossil exists. Root Fossil also effectively costs 2 mana, because you can play it turn 1, crack it turn 2, and it just has a lot more value attached to it. And there's and with Huskforger Acolyte and all of the extra value mana dorks on 2, I think you don't super need Ring of Promised Vows. Refusal of the Hollow Gift gives you or a permanent you control hexproof until end turn, so it's like Make an Escape. But doesn't give +1/+1, but it crucially can blank stuff like Chronicle Extinction and Duress. Go blank. These are all hugely played cards, and for that reason, I think Refusal of the Hollow Gift replaces Make an Escape as your hexproof trick of choice. Gold cards. These are the gold cards that if you're in their colors, you play them. In blue-black, we have Sidrafe Charm. This is a pretty good counterspell. Counters instants or sorceries, or scry to draw a card, or tap an online permanent stun counter on it. This is probably maybe a sideboard card. Opponent got a lot of instants or sorcery, you can easily play this. But there's another much better counterspell in blue-black. Destructive Ambition is just a straight-up 2 mana counter. It hits monocolored spells. That's like, even with this set adding a ton of gold stuff to the format, that's still well over half the spells in the format. And randomly, your opponent loses 2 life for this. Deft Deflection is the main competition here, but I think this is very worth playing in any blue-black control deck, and blue-black control looks very real with this set. And out of the sideboard, your blue-black control deck can bring in Trauma Spike. This is a reprint from MSEM. Name a card, and you get to rip out that card from opponent's graveyard, hand, library. Anti-control card. I personally am pretty low on these effects if you're not playing against specifically a control deck. Like, I don't like bringing these in or forget their names, similar effect, against just, like, control decks. But some people do. And this is probably worse than forget their names. Worse than forget their names against control, probably better against combo. In green-white, Rosen and Cladding Guilt, another kind of 3 mana value bomb. Gives your second spell you catch each turn 2 less to cast, so it's effectively a 4-drop a lot of time. You play this on turn 4, and then you play a 3-drop that costs 2 and a green or white. Like, what's a good one? What's a good one of those? I'm blanking right now. There's got to be a good one somewhere. The ones we just talked about, those are 2 and a green. And then whenever you cast a spell, it gets a +1/+1 counter, and it has Ward X for X the number of counters on Rosen, Cladding Guilt. This is going to get Ward very large number very fast. Your opponent has basically 1 turn to deal with this. And if they don't deal with it kind of the turn you play it, then it basically has hexproof and it gives you mana every turn. Huge value bomb. Basically, yeah, they can have hang immediately, otherwise they're in trouble. Big reason to be a green-white mid-range aggro deck. I have Survivor of the New World up here as the other kind of 4 mana green-white value Fiesta card. That card probably goes in the same deck, although it's awkward that it competes for the 4 mana slot. Sylvia the Rewoven Oath is an unusual green-white control card. Green-white, 6 mana flash planeswalker. So you flash this in on your opponent's end step. You either raft the board, they keep their biggest creature, or you make a 4/4. Um, Annoyingly, you can't get a -2 and a -4 in the same turn cycle because she comes in with 5 loyalty. Um, she untaps your permanents to ramp you even further if that's something you care about, but mostly she just spits out angels and cleans up most of the board. Common play pattern for this is like flash it in, um, +2 just for the life, untap, -4, and then play another removal spell to deal with their last creature. The main competition here is Shengfa, the other 6 mana planeswalker that comes with a board wipe. Um, Shengfa, well, it's a tough competition. I think Shengfa might honestly just be better. But it's certainly in the conversation. You could have reasons to want Sylvia instead. Blue red. I'm honestly not that impressed with most of the blue red cards in this set. The only one I have popped out as like generically good blue red card is Sistral Charm. This is just 2 mana lightning strike to a creature or battle, but it can also counter non-creature permanent spells, so artifacts, enchantments, planeswalkers, and battles. And copy your tokens. That's less relevant. Um, I think if you're in blue red, you consider this in your lightning strike slot over something like bleeding out. But bleeding out could easily still be better. Black green, 3 very important answers here. First of all, Culling Ritual. I keep mentioning there's a lot of tokens in this set. Well, Culling Ritual is, I think, the best answer to them. This is a canon reprint. Good against aggro, good against tokens. Put in your sideboard in basically all your black green decks, Sultai control, stuff like that. Revivified Wrath is a 2 mana sorcery. Alt costs 3 life or 2 more mana, but it destroys any non-land permanent. One of the few good ways of dealing with battles that have static abilities. This is a common, by the way. I think for the same, like if you're in black green, and especially if you're not in white for the banishing lights, you probably need a couple of these just to deal with annoying non-land, non-creature permanents that would otherwise slip you by. And Dolcairn Charm. This exiles creatures or planeswalkers with mana value 2 or less. That's kind of your default mode. But you can also regrowth a creature or land if there's nothing good to hit, or you can deal the last 3 points of damage to your opponent. I think this is in the same conversation. If you need small removal, you can play this. Um, I think it's right in there in the conversation with stuff with the more efficient downlink overload. Red White has a ton of important staples. I already mentioned them back in their mechanics overview, but Anansi for the Sun is a 3 mana 3/2 with ward sack a non-land permanent, and gives your attacking creatures without haze counters Rapture. So if any of them die, they come back. Slightly awkward, this doesn't do anything with tokens because they don't come back anyways. This is a lot worse than Electies as your 3 mana red-white aggro card, but I've looked through them. There's not really a better 3 mana Boros aggro card except maybe Renowned Rough Rider. So you might still play this. Ward on 3 drops is just like always spooky. Deafening Clarion, one of our many 3 mana rafts, kind of reprint. 3 mana, deal 3 to each creature, and gives your whole board lifelink until end of turn. This is a 3 mana sweeper. It's much like Coup d'etat. Similar like you play Coup d'etat if you're Grixis control, you'll play this if you're Jeskai control, or even white-red control. I've heard some people doing. Astarion, Architect of World. I mentioned there aren't a lot of really impressive 5 drops. Well, red white has some. If you're heavy red, you can play Aviva. If you're heavy white, you can play Derisha. But if you're not heavy red or heavy white, you're kind of balanced between them. Then we have Astarion or Amaranth. Astarion is the aggro 5 drop. Can't be countered, has a huge ward cost, and makes attacks for 3 the turn he comes in, and then 9 every subsequent turn. This is like your control beating card, and it sure does beat the hell out of control. Possibly even like a sideboard card against control decks in your aggro deck. Mainly competing with Offset Demon as the hard to answer aggressive threat slot. Amaranth Seeker of the Sun is another 5 mana planeswalker for red white. You can bounce your creatures, which also gives them haste because they come back at the declare attacker step, tapping attacking. You can also do that post combat if you want to, like, for some reason, keep your creature out of the way for a full turn cycle. She can also just be a 4/4 flying lifelink haste indestructible, or she can lightning helix things. She's kind of overlapping with Dutiful Wanderer. Dutiful Wanderer also is a 5-mana planeswalker that blinks things. Dutiful Wanderer has better removal than Amaret. I would say that if you're more aggressive, you want Amaret because Amaret has the option of just doming them for 4, which Dutiful Wanderer does not. The turn she comes into play. But if you're slower but still have things you want to blink, Dutiful Wanderer probably better because it's more defensive. And lastly, 2 colorless cards that I think are staples. One, Crucible of the Burning Sun. This is a 2-mana graveyard hate card that, much like the black one, exiles all cards or tokens that would be put into your opponent's graveyard, and it gradually exiles their whole graveyard and then starts scrying. This is, I think, better than Faces of the Faceless. It's close. The extra scry 1 value is probably upside. They both pretty much turn off all graveyard synergies. Kind of up in the air which one you want, but I think you might even want to mix because you don't want 2 Crucibles because the second one doesn't have cycling, so maybe you play like one of each. There's also Golden Bloom of the Silence, 2-mana legendary artifact. You can choose an online card name. Permanents of that name lose all abilities. Maidens does turn off planeswalkers, although it has certain other like anti-combo, anti-artifact and enchantment abilities. Okay, so I'm going to be going through the rest of the set, not in color order, but in package order. Like, going through all the big synergies that are relevant in Revolution, and asking what cards from the new set are going to be added to those synergies. Kind of roughly going from aggro to control. Starting with Burn. The deck's been floating around for a bit because of Butchery. Butchery is an excellent reason to put a lot of burn spells in your deck, and a deck that was just Butchery plus every other card in the deck triggers Butchery actually did quite well. Just making use of that first ability on Butchery, not really even caring about the last one. And we have an excellent card for Butchery in Burn to Obscurity. 3 mana, 1 red, 4 damage to any target, and it strips indestructible from creatures or planeswalkers and exiles things it kills. So, this is mainly the meaning of electronic countermeasures, not on this slide, which is 3 mana for 5 damage, and it's not double red, but can't hit players, crucially. Burn Obscurity is actually a really good burn spell. I think you could see play even if you're not a Butchery deck easily, because it's 4 to face. We don't often see 3 mana 4 to face, and that's quite powerful, and fits right into Butchery here. There's the Lightnings deck. That's what everyone calls the deck that plays a lot of Ball Lightnings, creatures that sack after hitting your opponent once. Expendable Arson and Prideful Reaper, both excellent cards from this deck. Haven't seen much of it lately, but I think it's still good. There's a new one. Unfortunately, it's red-white. This deck was usually black-red before, but if you're willing to stretch into white, you get Bloodhorn Ravager, which is a lightning that hits for 8 total. Or rather, it hits for 4 with lifelink, and then comes back as a 4/1 with no abilities. If you're doing the lightning thing, I think you probably stretch into white to fit this in. It's quite a big lifelink. Okay, now the biggest section. Tokens. Now, token aggro was already kind of a thing with like Eo's Agreed Equalizer and Kitsune Matriarch. Those are both excellent reasons to put creature tokens in your deck. Well, in this set, there are so many more reasons to put tokens in your deck. So many that you could build a token aggro deck, red, white, or Naya token aggro deck, just with the cards in this set, and I think it'd be pretty good. Let's start with the ways you're making the tokens. We have 2 different raise alarms. Doctrine of Cleansing Flames is a common raise alarm, makes 2 1/1s or exiles an artifact. Probably worse than our existing raise alarms. It's a really good one. It advances the Sainted March, which is 2 mana, sorcery speed, makes 2 1/1 red berserkers. But if you can deal 3 damage to it, which as a token deck, maybe you can afford to do that, you get freedom. You get the backside of Sparks of Revolution. You get a 1/1 every time you attack, tapped and attacking. There's also Resolute Reinforcements. Repeat from Cannon. It's a soldier relevantly, and it has Flash. So if you rather raise alarm had Flash and be a creature itself, this is here for you. There's also Clash Scorchroot Bluff, which is a 3 mana Operation Battle that just gets you 2 1/1s every turn. They go away the next end step, but this is basically 3 mana for 2 unkillable power in your token deck. Um, and because it itself gives you creatures haste, it's actually pretty easy to defeat this one, and the last ability is an Ansem. Uh, Also in green, I think most of the token support is in red-white. I think you probably want a splash screen, which makes the 1 green cost on Commander of the Vow kind of tricky, but it's 3 mana for 3 bodies, and whenever a token you control hits your opponent, you get a +1/+1 counter on it. By the way, this in Revolution right now we have whenever it deals damage to a player, whenever it deals damage to a player or planeswalker, and whenever it deals damage to a player, planeswalker, or battle, all in on various cards. You need to keep track of which of those your card is. Yeah, if you're willing to stretch an Anaya and you can support 1 green, that was another excellent way to make tokens. Uh, well, now that I've made tokens, I'd love some value enchantments. There's Sigil of the Last Light here. So this is a 1 mana enchantment, and it gets a +1/+1 counter whenever a creature you control enters. And if you get this twice in a turn, you get a flying first strike, lifelink, or vigilance counter. And then if you can do this 6 times in 1 turn, you get double strike or indestructible. That's almost never going to happen. But you know, in your token aggro deck that plans to kill your opponent on turn 4, which is I think mostly how this deck plays, there's not a lot of room for an enchantment that doesn't affect the board immediately, but if you could play it on turn 1, it'll easily be like 6/6 flying lifelink by the time you want to activate on turn like 5 or so. It also has an activated ability for Contest Coordinator. I think it's worth testing. I wouldn't be surprised if this was like really obnoxious. The fact that it dodges removal, the fact that it's completely enormous. I also wouldn't be surprised if the aggro decks are just like, nah. By the time this is relevant, my opponent should be dead. There's Gospel of Dominion, 3 mana enchantment. Whenever a creature you control has no abilities, such as, for example, a token, deals combat damage to a player or battle, not planeswalker, just player or battle, you can exile top of your card library, and you can play the card until the end of your next turn. Of your next turn, crucially, so if you play this and get some cards immediately, you get them until the next turn. And whenever you play a land or cast a spell from exile, you get a 1/1 Berserker. So Gift Inspiration, the card I've seen around occasionally, it's actually quite efficient. It gets you a card whenever you hit your opponent's 2 mana. For 1 more mana, this gets you a card for every creature. And it also generates tokens itself. Once again, the cards that are not creatures or token makers or anthems in your token deck are like real limited slots, but I could see this justifying itself in those slots. But what if we had more anthems? Consume the Divine, triple white, if you heavy white. Whenever a creature you control attacks, you get a +1/+1 counter on it. And whenever a creature you control dies, you draw a card if it has 3 or more counters on it. That second ability, not enormously relevant. I don't. White is not really the +1/+1 counters in Revolution right now. +1/+1 counter color. But it's an anthem. It's an anthem that even gets bigger over time. Its main competition is Cassis Valley, same set, also a 3 mana anthem. And you probably don't have room for infinite 3 mana anthems. But yeah, if you can swing the triple white in your token aggro deck, sure, why not? Doesn't even have to be super tokeny. But don't worry, we have creatures that benefit from tokens too. Syra, Blade of Memory, is a 3 mana 2/3 that gains you a life whenever a creature you control enters. So just a Soul Warden for you. And if you can play, whenever you play a Raise the Alarm, whenever you get 2 creatures in a single turn, you draw a card. Like the way I'm seeing this deck is much like how Cat and Tree built it in the finals that I faced against them. It's like EO, stuff like this, and then 16 Raise the Alarm. If you have 16 Raise the Alarm in the deck, I think Syra is a pretty good card. Also, if you get 3 creatures in the same turn, which is not hard, just play a Sparks of Revolution plus a Raise the Alarm, you get a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Underaw, Fervor and Flame, 2 mana 2/1. Whenever a creature you control enters, if you didn't cast it, such as if, for example, it's a token from a Raise the Alarm, you get to choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn, get +1/+1 counter, menace until a turn, or scry 2. This, like, grows significantly slower than Kitsune Matriarch, because it's only 1 counter per turn maximum, but it does give you a ton of scry 2. Tons of cards listed here. I think you could slot in a couple of these in your token deck, maybe. Just for the scry value. Enduring Vowholder gets a +1/+1 counter for each creature whenever another creature control enters, no matter token or non-token. And if you can trigger that 3 times a turn, just like Syra, you draw a card. This just, once again, gets enormous pretty fast. Just a ton of competition. The 2-drop slot is the main thing with all the Raise the Alarms. Oh wait, we're still not done. There's also Divinity. This is an impact framework. We had a kind of an impact framework before in Carta's Legacy, but that only counted non-tokens, and this one sure does count tokens. If two or more creatures die under your control in a turn, you get a 1/1. That's an incredibly minor ability. I think you're mostly playing this for the first ability, which is quite good. Especially like out of the sideboard against control decks, where like even if they answer all your creatures, you're still burning them down. Rite of Harmony is a canon reprint that draws you a card for the turn whenever a creature or enchantment enters. It even has flashback. This card is a lot worse than the 1/1 Glimpse of Nature, but once again, in your all Raise the Alarm deck, especially if you have like repeatable token creation, like the 3 mana Battle I showed earlier, or Cash Thrasher, which makes an enchantment token each turn, um, then I could see this. Probably less of a home for it. It's clearly a powerful card. I'm sure Lid's going to try to do something with it, but I don't know if there's really a home for it. Harmony, um, it says whenever you play a Raise the Alarm, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. And also, whenever you attack with 8 or more power of creatures, draw a card. But also, if you attack with 8 or more power of creatures in your aggro deck, your opponent probably dies. So, not super relevant. But, if you want to get an Ansem every time you cast a Raise the Alarm, you can do this. Also, puts a ton of +1/+1 counters everywhere for stuff like Shiori. I don't think there are a ton of other +1/+1 counter synergies you'd put in this deck, but that's an option. They're also like all three of these cards put +1/+1 counters on creatures, so there could be like Naya +1/+1 counters and tokens could be a thing. Okay, I hope you understand now that token aggro is a thing, and you need to be prepared for it. You need to be afraid of it. I think it's like your default best deck going into the next season. Artifacts. Much smaller slide. Let's all relax. Attuned Acolyte has justified an entire archetype of making lots of little artifact tokens. Sculptor's Replica, also an important card in that archetype. There's almost no artifacts in the set. The only one I could find that could maybe be relevant is Thorn of Azurite. If you're very creature heavy, you can play this 3 mana artifact that makes your opponent's non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast out of the sideboard. Maybe, probably not. Extraction Mission. So there's kind of two overlapping packages. There's the Extraction Mission package, and there's the Sacrifice package, mostly from Kitsu Dusk of Time. Both kind of in black red. Both care about playing creatures with good death triggers. Um, both care about sacrificing and sacrifice fodder. Hasn't had a great performance last 3 months, but I think the bones of a really great deck are still there. First new card for this archetype is kind of innocuous. Bloodline Inciter, the 2 mana 1/1. It dies into 2/1/1s because it comes back and it makes a 1/1 token. This is 3 pieces of sack fodder for 2 mana. If you have reasons to sack creatures, uh, this is a very good piece of sack fodder. Also, there's the Forever Heart. It says it's a 3 mana Monarch. It taps for any color. It's legendary. And whenever a creature you control dies, you can discard a card with equal or greater mana value. And if you do, you get that card back a finality counter. So this could become part of like. Unfortunately, we don't have Scofo's Conqueror anymore. That was a really key card for the mission sack deck. But if you like, okay, I'm going to sack my Audacious Rough Rider. Then I'm going to discard another card to get back my Audacious Rough Rider. Get 2 Rough Rider triggers. That gives me treasures. Meanwhile, I'm getting copies of it off Serve Again, stuff like that. Could be a piece of the puzzle. Once again, Serve Again's probably better, and you have limited room for 3 mana non-creature cards that care about when your creatures die. But some redundancy there. Coordinated Shot is a Lightning Strike, 2 mana sorcery, 3 damage to any target. This could even see play outside of the sack deck, just because we don't actually have 1 in a red sorcery, 3 to any target anywhere else. There's Bleeding Out, which is double red, and all the other ones don't hit players. But the reason I'm saying here is because it's flashback for involves sacrificing a creature, so that's a way to make use of Karaja or Devoted Lackeys. And once again, this can hit face, so can even deal the last 3 points of damage, which are the most valuable. And lastly, Receiver to the Golden Sun, which is a 2 mana enchantment that has abilities that care about illusions, but don't look at that. Look at the discard ability. This is 2 mana to Heat Shimmer one of your creatures, only at sorcery speed. Once again, if you have stuff like Rough Riders or what are other good things to Heat Shimmer? We don't have Conjurer anymore. Wildkin Avengers. Yeah, you can play this. It's uncounterable because it's a discard ability. That's nice. Unfortunately, it exiles at the end step, not sacrifice. So you need probably want another sack out with like Aushin's Presence or something. Not enormously high on mission sack. It didn't get anything like truly broken, and it wasn't broken before. Ninjas. Blue white was our key deck for ninjas. There's Chorus of One is a new 1 mana flash flyer of a 3 mana ability you can exile from your graveyard to make a 1/1 with prowess. This is another 1 mana flash flyer, much like Sleeper Strix, probably worse than Sleeper Strix. Skyhood Sever is the card I mentioned earlier, but it's a cheap flyer, so it's relevant for ninjas. Crucially, both these cards have activated abilities. You can get them off Contest Coordinator, which is a key card in the ninjas deck. Ninjas, I think, not the most powerful deck, but these are both solid, not broken inclusions in it. Spellslinger. There are a lot of good Spellslinger cards in this deck. Currently in Revolution, the Spellslinger deck is really subsidized by Savvy Smith, and to a much lesser extent by Covetous Frostworm, but Savvy Smith is an incredible value card, big reward for putting lots of instant sorceries in your deck. We also have Clash at Mistrit Vale coming in this set. 3 mana, battle. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you get a 1/1 soldier. We already have kind of this effect in Ether Dancers, the blue-white card from Kitsuo. But this is not white, which is an upside, and it's a battle, so it's much harder to deal with. Um, and crucially, non-creature. Non-creature, very different instant sorcery with, for example, triggering off other copies of itself. And if you're a Spellslinger deck, you can easily play a shock. You can shock it to get back any other instant sorcery from your graveyard to your hand, and you might even deal the other 3 damage to get the discount. That seems less likely to happen. Maybe a hit if it covers Frostworm. Nothing else better to do with your life. It's a fine include. The 3 mana Spellslinger engines are so much worse than the 2 mana ones, just because it delays you an additional turn before you even start going off. Uh, there's also some stuff for specifically kind of a chant deck. If you want to build around the chant mechanics, there's Speaker of Currents, which discounts your instant sorceries by 1, and you can chant your creatures from the battlefield, basically. You can use their chant abilities while they're on the battlefield. Once again, Discern, brought it up earlier, that's the best card to chant onto in the format. There is a card that we talked about way back when we talked about mechanics that has a chant 5 mana, take an extra turn after this one. Obviously, you get that in place with Speaker of Currents. You take infinite turns very easily, because every instant sorcerer you can pay 5 mana to take an extra turn. Other than that, your best chant ability to get repeatedly is probably Sealed Sigil Adept, but that's like, it's really hard to get that card onto the battlefield for 4 mana, 4/2. Another really big chant card is Angler of the Crushing Sea. This is chant blue to make the spell it's chanted onto cost 1 less for each instant or sorcery card in your graveyard and each creature card in exile that has chant. This is a ritual. Suppose you have 8 instant sorceries in your graveyard. That's not hard. You can play blue, black, chant a Festered Effluvium for X equals 8. That probably draws you 5 cards, gets you 5 mana. Maybe you draw an Angler and another Festered Effluvium. You can do it again, but now it's even more because you milled yourself for 8. You can chant cards from the graveyards. You can use Angler to chant back to flash back a Chronicle of Extinction for 3 mana. Blue Chronicle also for 3 mana. This is a very real card in like a blue-black Storm deck, which is why it is not surviving. This card, the curators have already said that this card is on the chopping block, and I don't blame them. That deck looked very silly. There's also a spend 4 or mana to cast instant or sorcery spells theme in this set. I am not super high on that, like mainly because there's only really one 4 mana instant or sorcery that is really good right now, and that's Chronicle of Extinction. Like Witchery gives your whole board prowess effectively, and also if you spend 4 mana to cast instant or sorcery, you get a 4/4. I think to play this card, you need to be triggering that last ability. Similarly, Witch of the First Echoes is a 2 mana 2/2 flash prowess. Similarly, has a spend 4 mana, you get a 1/1 of prowess. Sarah Druid Matron, 4 mana 4/4 flying prowess. Whenever you cast instant or sorcery, you get 1 of lesser mana value from your graveyard for free. Yeah, I think there's just not quite enough support for this whole package, but if there's one 4 mana instant or sorcery I overlook, and obviously you can fulfill this with 2 instants or sorceries, but it's just, I'd much rather do it with 1, makes it much more reliable. Yeah, not super high on these. Looter. So Looter is kind of a blue-red base archetype that's been going around for a while. basically, it plays stuff like Ignited Soul and Fabricated Anomaly and Industrialize to discard cards for value, and you discard stuff like Igneous Visions and Industrialize so that you could keep going. Maybe Scuttling Cicada. Sometimes this deck also played Savvy Smith um, or Research Grant. Um, it's a cool kind of deck core that you can put a lot of cards in. And there's some excellent cards for this archetype. Stargazing, I think, is mostly a better Industrialize. So you pay one, you scry one, you draw a card, and then you can discard a card to put Stargazing back in your hand. You can only do this once each turn. You can't cast more Stargazings in the same turn. But it's like an Industrialize, except when you flash it back, you still have access to it. You can basically pay one, scry one, draw a card, put it back in your hand, and then discard whatever card you want. If you have extra copies, you can discard the extra copies to your first Stargazing. If you need to, it lets you cast an instant sorcery every turn for stuff like Savvy Smith. It lets you draw a card, an extra card every turn for stuff like Research Grant. Very strong if you have that kind of like discard synergy. Gilded Noon Entertainer is a 2-mana 3/2. When it attacks, you can discard a card. If you do, draw a card. And if you discard a non-land, it gets first strike until end of turn. This is like, with this card, you now have a full curve. Ignited Soul into Gilded Noon Entertainer into Fabricated Anomaly of aggressive red cards that loot. Loot or rummage in Gilded Noon Entertainer's choice. And yeah, once again, more options for this synergy. And you even get a removal spell just for this deck in Aldegar of Path Unwoven. This is a blue-red for a sorcery that deals 3 damage to any target, but if you choose, you can instead have it be a Planeswalker that +1s to discard a card, then draw a card. So we've seen, what was it, Shrine to Keranos? That was the 2-mana Shrine, beginning of combat on your turn, discard a card, draw a card. Be played in decks even with no other shrines, because that's just a really efficient version of that effect. And having that as an extra option on your burn spell is really nice. Honestly, the problem with looter at this point is you have too many good looters. Look at the 5 good looting spells just on this slide, plus Industrialize. You probably don't need all 5, so it's really which of these 5 fit your curve best. Golems. Now, unfortunately, much to dismay of everyone said, not only are there no jellyfish in this set, there are no golems in this set, which it seems weird. Golem, Revolution's most supported type. But there are 2 excellent clones in this set. Reflected Echo is a 3-mana instant speed clone, except it makes the token a 1/1. But it has flashback for 2 blue. Once again, instant speed. Clones, obviously really good in Titans, because they have excellent attract triggers, and excellent enter triggers, and you really want to get 2 critical massive golems, and the fact that your token's a 1/1 doesn't super matter if you're copying on Speaking Titan, but your opponent's not going to have any blockers anyways. I think this probably replaces the others. This may or may not replace whatever the 3-mana clone was. Chronicle of Precedence. May or may not replace Chronicle of Precedence in golems. Also easier on the mana in your 3 or 4 or 5 color deck. There's another clone in Cloudveil Reshaper. It copies any creature except it has Decoy. Now, it only counts as 1 to your golem count, but if it ever gets to attack and it's a copy of an Unspeaking Titan, you get 2 Unspeaking Titan triggers instead of just 1. Probably a little expensive for golems, which wants to be getting its 3 golems as fast as possible, but an option worth considering. Especially nasty copying of a Black Titan. Plush Collection is a build-around that we've been seeing some of. It loses Menelea, which was a very good card in that deck, but it gets Huskforger Acolyte. Plush Collection is excellent with Monodorks. The fact that we have a 1-mana Monodork is huge. Turn 1, Huskforger Acolyte. Turn 2, Plush Collection. Turn 3, start making copies of Huskforger Acolyte is just an excellent curve, even if you're doing nothing else with your mana. Definitely could see Plush Collection. Only awkward thing that Huskforger Acolyte does tap for colorless, and this deck has some pretty hard mana requirements as a 3-color deck, but you'll make do. Weftheart is kind of an archetype unto itself. Not really any great enchantments for Weftheart. There's basically only one enchantment that looks like it has any legs. That's Sanctified Cartography. Enters, makes a tap Eververse token. Whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield without dying, you get to bounce it back to your hand. If you were in Naya Weftheart, you could consider this as your 3-mana ramp enchantment that you can then Weftheart away. but you probably still just want Mapper's Wanderings, which just doesn't require you to play a third color. Graveyard. There's a ton of like Sultai graveyard-ish stuff floating around, and even though it's not a main theme of the set, there's some support for it. Oh, I realized to cut off Casimir's loyalty. It's 4 loyalty. And Stropomancy is a card I really don't know what to think of. This gives you basically Sylvan Library. You look at the top 2 cards of your library. You can put them into your graveyard, or you can pay 4 life to put them in your hand. And whenever a creature you control has to gain 1 life, this card like it wants you to be playing a lot of creatures, but it also wants you to care about the graveyard. Somewhat perplexing card. I don't really know what to make of it, but I think if it does see play, it'll be for the graveyard synergy. Casimir's is something unusual. This is a Delirium payoff. One and only Delirium payoff in the set. 3 mana, 4 loyalty Planeswalker. +1 to draw a card, but whenever you activate its loyalty abilities, you have to discard a card or sacrifice a permanent. And then it might transform if you have Delirium. So, +1 basically draw, then discard or sacrifice. -2, your opponent sacrifices a creature or Planeswalker, then you have to sacrifice a creature or Planeswalker. Sorry, you have to sacrifice a permanent or discard a card. If you can't flip this reliably, I don't think it's worth playing. But I think this graveyard deck does actually play, incidentally, a large variety of card types. Land's really easy. You have tons of creatures that you care about. Artifact Root Fossil is a common artifact that you'll play in this deck. This is Casimir's himself as a Planeswalker, so extra copies are Planeswalkers. Uh, Enchantment. Ever-present Rot? Okay, not super great enchantment options. So yeah, Delirium is fully achievable in this deck, and if you're willing to build your deck to get Delirium, then you get a Planeswalker that maintains the same loyalty, like it doesn't exile in return, it just transformed. But you just get +2, draw 2 cards on your Planeswalker. Or if you don't want to draw 2 cards a turn, you can blow up a creature or Planeswalker and make your opponent discard a card. Yeah, Delirium. Interesting thing we haven't really had support for before. There's a couple other graveyard things. Remnant of the Devoured Sun is a really good 5-drop. The graveyard deck's kind of lacking a 5-drop. It wants a 5-drop because it has a lot of ramp, and because it intends to go long, so it wants a big value on 5-drop. Aqua Crew used to play that role, but Aqua Crew got nerfed into the ground, so I think you want to play this instead. Additional cost, you exile 7 cards from your graveyard. On a 5-drop, that's pretty easy. And it's a 7/7 indestructible. When it enters or attacks, you get to return a card exile to your hand. And if it's a permanent card of mana value less than the number of cards in your hand, it goes on the battlefield instead. Yeah. 5 mana, 7/7 indestructible, regrowths a card on enter is pretty good. The condition's very easy to meet. Basically, that's the same condition as getting Surface, and you wanted to get Surface in these decks anyways. Also, Reaper of Blossoms is a very good graveyard filling card. 2 mana, 2/3. And at the beginning of your end step, you mill 3 cards. Just for free, you get to mill 3 cards every turn. And then you can either pay green to get a land from your graveyard to your hand, or you can gain 1 life. I think this probably spells the death knell for Eager Scavenger. I loved Eager Scavenger, but this is just so much better in the Sultai graveyard deck in every way. Yeah, just a ton of self-mill. The body is very nice. 3 toughness is a relevant number. Helps you hit your land drops if you need to. Gains you incidental life against aggro. Really might be the most important addition that Sultai Graveyard gets. Mono Black Control. We're getting close to the end of our old archetype discussion. This is the Damned to Hell deck. And it doesn't get much from this set. Only card that really stands out to me is Reign of Blight. That's a 4 mana Raft, gives -3/-3 until end of turn. Has Vigor text that could be relevant. You do have occasional like life gain synergies in your Mono Black Control deck. Yeah. If you really need a 4 mana Raft on top of your Damned to Hell, Reign of Blight is there in the sideboard for you. If it like we have 3 mana -2/-2 in Failed Gateway. We have 5 mana kind of kill everything in Damned to Hell. But if you exactly need 4 mana -3/-3 because you have 3 W creatures you need to kill, then you can play Reign of Blight in your Mono Black Control deck. And Ramp. Obviously, Ramp kind of subsidized by Aurora Buffer exec these days. Very happy to see Huskforger Acolyte. 1 mana Ramp spell makes all the Ramp decks better. Sylvia is another potential card you can ramp into, but I don't see a ton of great stuff to ramp into in this set. But Husky Dracula is more than enough to make an impact. And Reanimator. So there is one reanimation spell in this set, but it's a doozy. It's Reclaim the Fallen. It's just 4 mana Reanimate. 4 mana, return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It doesn't even have Flashback. There are good reanimation targets in the format because of Errors in the West with Privilege Escalation and a couple others. And there is incredible synergy here with Shigana Manor Burns. You play Shigana Manor turn 2, turn 3, you discard Privilege Escalation, you cast Reclaim the Fallen, you get it back. You get turn 3 Privilege Escalation, that's pretty good, which is why, once again, this is not going to survive. The curators have already said to not shed too many tears for Reclaim the Fallen when it gets changed, which it will. Okay, now those were all the decks that already existed and Twi adds something new to. But let's talk about completely brand new packages of cards, archetypes that Twiltrie adds cards for. Starting off with an idea, Soldier Typo. There's 2 really good Soldier Typo cards in the set. Blessed Line Warden, 1 mana 1/1, gives your other soldiers +1/+0. Also buffs your angels. Weirdly, I think you can mostly ignore the angel text. Ward 1's not that relevant, and there aren't very many good angels. Angel Bound Warden is a 3 mana 2/2, Ward 2. Whenever it or another soldier enters, you get a +1 counter. So it's just 3 mana 3/3, Ward 2 on the start. Once again, Ward 2 on 3 drops is very scary. Also has an angel text that you can once again mostly ignore. Sparks of Revolution and Flags on High make soldier tokens. So your Naya tokens deck could have a soldier subtheme and play these cards plus Flags on High and Sparks of Revolution. That's a reasonable core package. Right. I mentioned I wasn't high on tons of the decoy cards, but there are 2 very good kind of decoy support cards if you want to build the decoy deck. There's Fluttering Sun, which doubles up all your decoy triggers, and you can sack illusions to give your fairies hexproof until end of turn. Now, unknowingly, although decoy makes illusion tokens, those go away at end of turn, so he doesn't really protect himself on your opponent's turn, but 4 mana 4/4 flyer is already not a bad stat line. Snow on Petals is the other awkwardly also 4 mana decoy payoff. 4 mana 4/4, and when it attacks, you get a 1/1 copy of it. That is legendary, but the legend rule doesn't apply to it. And that doesn't go away at end of turn. So you just get a 1/1 every turn, and that 1/1 has decoy. So if it survives, it will itself make more copies of itself. Blue, red, red's kind of an awkward casting cost, especially for what wants to be a creature-based deck. But the exponential potential here is worth talking about. And a random uncommon decoy card that I think might actually tie this whole package together. Mystery Archivist, 3 mana 0/5. When it enters, you draw a card. And when it attacks, you get a 1/1 copy. So this is just 3 mana 0/5, draw a card when it enters, and draw a card when it attacks. That's actually pretty good. 0/5 is very hard to kill, even often can't be blocked down. Reminds me of old Callisto the Techiarch in 3 mana card, draw the card every turn. It's faster, draw the card and enter too. Not super high on the decoy deck, but could be something here, and these are the cards that would make it work. Now let's talk about Blink/Bounce as an archetype. This is the white-green seam in the set. There is kind of some Blink support in white-blue, or mainly just white-blue already. So let's talk about what are the things I'm blinking and bouncing in green-white. Well, I think the best 1-drop to blink in green-white is probably Melon. There's also Super User, and if you go into blue, you get Tireless Aspirants and Demographer. But if you keep blinking and Melon's a 1-drop, and so if you're bouncing him repeatedly, having him cost 1 is super valuable. And every Melon after the first gets you a Clique trigger, so make a 2/2 token, Surveil 2. That's pretty good. If you're willing to bounce and replay 2-drops over and over again, we have Dawnward Minister, which is mostly 2 mana 1/1, enter, draw a card. Although if you cast 2 spells, which is not that difficult, you also gain 2 life off it. That's pretty good. Dawnspark Vanguard. Annoyingly, it has Reprieve itself, which means you cannot bounce it with your other Reprieve cards, but you can bounce it with your other non-Reprieve bounce effects, which there are in this set. 2 mana 1/1 gets you a basic land out of your library and into your hand. You can Reprieve a creature as well. You can bounce your Melon or your Dawnward Minister to get any land card instead, which is not big upside. Basically, you do that if you really just want to bounce a creature. Competing with both of these is mostly Male Demon from Errors in the West. all three of you are like 2 mana 1/1s that draw you a card whenever you blink/bounce them. Mill Demon draws the cards a little slower because it's on leave rather than enter, but the body's more real. Could be a thing. But how am I going to bounce all my creatures? Well, there's one mana. For 1 mana, you get Soft Light Harmonist. 1 mana, 1/1 flying, but you can bounce a creature to make it a 2/2 flying. We've seen cards like this do serious work in Canon, although this one only bounces creatures. Although the best things to bounce if it couldn't bounce creatures were the Omens, which are already gone. So yeah, stuff like turn 1 Melon, turn 2 Softlight Harmonist, bounce Melon, replay Melon. You have a 2/2 flyer and a Melon, and you got to get a Clique trigger. That's not bad. Sanctum of Repression is a removal spell for your Blink deck. It exiles a non-land permanent with mana values 3 or less. Just straight up 2 mana enchantment, Oblivion Ring, non-land permanent, mana values 3 or less is already like pretty close to being a playable card. That's the most permanents I care about. And you can bounce your melons and your male demons and your such to exile any non-land permanent instead. And we also have Vow's Reflection. This is more of a slow value card, which this is kind of a slow value archetype in general. 2 mana enchantment. End step, you can bounce one of your creatures to draw a card. I do want to mention probably another. I do want to mention that in addition to like Brief Stop and Soul's Refit, there's also Refresh Demon from Arrows in the West as a blue-white card that you could play in your Blink deck. Blinks all of your blinkable things. It's also a decent thing to blink and replay itself, permanently lock down your opponent's creatures. And okay, here's Brief Stop. There's another blink spell in the set in Unyielding Conviction. This is a 1 mana blink spell, only hits creatures, and it can also like make your creatures unblocked. So if you attack and your creature gets blocked, you can Unyielding Conviction it, and then it'll come back unblocked. So it has the extra utility of getting your creatures past blockers. But mostly this is just 1 mana blink. We didn't really have 1 mana blink before this, so this card is pretty good. And kind of a spicy option for this deck is Iron the Last Light. This deck is more flash-based than most mid-range decks because so many of the blink spells are instants. So you could easily disguise the fact that you're leaving up 4 mana for a 3/4 flying flash lifelink. And whenever you blink or bounce one of your creatures, you could untap 3 lands. This is actually a ton of value. And I think this deck could easily accommodate 1 or 2 copies of this. And, flashing it in to ambush a fabricated anomaly or something in combat, that's not bad either. And there's also some big reprieve cards. So if you want to, like, really go up the curve, now this deck is already pretty mono hungry. Like, you're going to be playing a 2-drop, which bounces another 2-drop, and then replaying that 2-drop, and then drawing a card, and then playing that card. So you're not liable to run out of stuff to do very often. But if you're willing to play 5 and 6-drop, we got some good ones. Dawnham Herald, 5 mana 4/4. When it enters, you get to choose one. You get to gain 5 life, or make 2 1/1s, or exile a creature power 4 or greater. But if you reprieve a creature, you get all 3. So yeah, just big value bomb 5-drop in your reprieve deck. Choir Ascendant, even more value bomb, 6 mana 4/4 reprieves 3 times, and for each time you get a 4/4 flying. Choir Ascendant, I think, is probably a sideboard card. You bring this in if you're in like a mid-range value Fiesta matchup where you don't have a lot of answers to their stuff, they don't have a lot of answers to your stuff, and it's just who can spin their value engine the fastest. This is like your trump card. You play this, you bounce your whole board, you make 16 power worth of flyers, and that'll probably get the job done. Both of these cards are competing with the Dutiful Wanderer, which is also a 5 mana card for your Blink deck, but also like removes creatures. Any creatures, not just ones with power 4 or greater. Which is a tough competition. I think Dutiful Wanderer is probably the one you want over Dawnham Herald, but it's close. Unearths. There's a lot of unearths in Revolution right now, and there are 3 additional unearths coming in this set. Thorn and Trial, the 2 mana unearth, gets creatures or planeswalkers, and if you deal 2 damage to it, it gets spells your opponent's caster in turn. Doesn't do much, but if you can deal 3 more damage to it, you get a 4/4 of flying. Too Late for Grace is just 2 mana sorcery, unearth, but it gets a +1/+1 encounter. Call of the Crown, for 4 mana, you can reanimate all of your 1-drops, and they all get Menace, Death Touch, or Lifelink. 6 mana, all the 2-drops is probably the sweet spot here. This is on top of our excellent unearths in Return and Stain Strokes. There's even some red-white unearths in this set. These like Ezra and the Unburned is a 4 mana 4/3 of haste. Whenever it attacks, it gets back probably like a 1 or 2 drop. Taps the attacking with finality counter on it. Sunwrath Charm is the red-white charm. The first mode is Tormenting Voice, and the last mode is kind of a small removal spell, but you're mostly playing this if you can consistently get value for the second mode, which gets back just unnerf 4 creatures mana value 2 or less. Really, the problem with the unnerf deck right now is not that the unnerfs aren't good. The unnerfs are great. The main problem is, like, there's not really any great 3 mana creatures to unnerf. Like, Data Weaver used to be our generic 3 mana value creature of choice, but that's kind of gone now. You could get back the Rough Riders, I guess. Scofa's Conjurer was good, but that just rotated. Like, what we really wanted is a 3 mana creature with, as an additional cost, I don't know, something you don't want to pay. And then you could circumvent that cost if you're unnerfs. But we don't really have that. So these unnerfs are just like cheating you by 1 mana, which doesn't really inspire confidence. But if someone can find that magic card that you want to unnerf, boy, you can unnerf it a lot of times. Right, there's life gain and life loss themes in this set. So the two big life gain payoffs that I believe in are Cruxborn Tyrant and Anik Oathbound. Cruxborn Tyrant is a 2 mana 2/2 flyer, which is kind of priced to move, and it dings your opponent for 1 each turn if you gained life, and if you gain 3 or more life, you get a 1/1 spirit, and 9 or more life, you get a card from your hand. Okay, that's a lot of life. I think getting the 3 life on this thing is not that inconsistent. He kind of has bunny ears, which I think is funny. 2 drop for your life dink deck. But I think the real 2 drop you want is Anik Oathbound. 2 mana 1/3. It has the it's a we already had a Soul Warden. There's another different Soul Warden. Um, and you can cast it from your graveyard transformed for 4 mana for 2 black green if you've gained or lost life this turn. Um, and so and the backside is a reasonable planeswalker. 3 loyalty, +1, make a 2/2, you gain 2 life, so go to 4, but doesn't really defend herself. The -1 makes them sack an all-land permanent, but this is like at least turn 4, probably later, so that's like not spectacular. Although if it had mono value 2 or less, she phases out, so you get to do it again. And the emblem weirdly, I think this is more of a life gain card than a life loss card, but the emblem wants you to be hitting your opponent. Although it does get you more life gain. Uh, yeah, the Planeswalker is like nothing to write home about. Mostly, I think that -1 is the most powerful ability. But if you care about life gain uh, for stuff like Curseborn Tyrant, there's a reasonable card to include. We already have one very good green-black life gain card in the format in Life Hacker. That's, I think, the better life gain payoff than either of these. We already seen Life Hackers like a couple incidental pieces of life gain do some work. Sifting Through Soot is, I think, the other really good life gain card. Basically, you want 0 mana ways to gain life, so that you can get Vigor for your Anik without spending mana. Could be a thing, and as always, life gain decks are always really good against aggro, which is a real upside. There's also life loss rewards. Bleed for the Cause is a 1 mana sorcery that makes a 2/2 that can't block, and you lose 1 life. And if you can lose 3 or more life on your turn, you can return it from your graveyard to the hand. Best way to do this: Profane Grove. Turn 1, shotgun a Profane Grove, play Bleed for the Cause, immediately get it back. There's also Night's Whisper and Pass Unresolved that we talked about earlier, which you can put in your like base black green kind of Death Shadow-ish deck. Speaking of Death Shadow, there's often the Crown's Shadow. If your life total is less than your starting life total, it costs X less to cast, where X is the difference. Its Trample Vigilance reach the 9/9 of Hexproof. So to be really happy with this, I'd want to pay like 3 mana for this. So I need to be at 8 life, which is doable. Also, a potential sideboard card against aggro is a little sketchier. For both of these cards, and like for Vigor as a mechanic in general, I want to bring up the Coalesced lands. If you really want to be able to lose life whenever you feel life, like the Coalesced lands, I think the best option to do that. Like Coalesced Cliff, you have that in play. Most of the time, you just tap for Coalesced. But if you ever need to enable Vigor, have lost life this turn, you just tap your Coalesced Cliff and it's online. And unlike Profane Grove, which is just the turn you play it, it's online any turn that you want it. There's also payoffs for either gaining or losing life. So Sovereign's Execution is another 2 mana removal spell. This is a common, by the way. Good lord. Destroy target creature, power 3 or less. So same condition as Hang, but instead of the corrupt condition, it is a Vigor condition. I think you probably want Hang unless you're a really committed Vigor deck. Even the Vigor deck plays 3 mana value permanents. There's also Vardo Ravelon Forever King. 4 mana 8/6, which makes your opponent with a Titan trigger to make your opponent sacrifice a non-land permanent. And it can go back to your graveyard to your hand by discarding cards, but you can't cast it unless your life total is 25 or more or 9 or less. I think it's probably more of a life gain card than a life loss card. Maybe out of the sideboard if you're like, I'm a life gain deck, but my opponent's kind of a mid-range deck or a control deck. It's not pressuring my life total, so my life gain's not that relevant. Uh, this is something that can make gaining life relevant. Bringing up Borrow here as a card that both gains and loses you life pretty often. Um, for your Vardo and Sovereign's Execution and other such vigor payoffs. And lastly, there's one legend payoff in the set. Throne of Ravelon is a 3 mana artifact. Like every other card in the set, it's an Ansem. This time only if you control a legendary creature. And if you have a legendary creature, you can draw a card on your end step. I don't know. If your deck randomly, if your creature based deck randomly turns out to have a high density of legends, like if you're red white tokens and you're like, oh, I have Toki and Jorgen and Amber. Oh, I could probably just play this. And yeah, if you have that density, this card's really good. And that is... That is Exalts of Twiltrie. Once again, if I missed anything, no, I didn't. That was on purpose. I'm excited for this set. I mean, it's a Zangi set. What's not to love about a Zangi set? Lots of brewing to do. Afraid of that tokens deck. But also, there's a lot of stuff for blue-based control as a big part of this set. Hope to see you in the Discord chat or next month in the GP. We will get to play with these cards for the first time. Good night.